All right, let's make sure Git is ready for a Windows machine. For those of you using Windows machine, in this video, we are going to make sure Git is ready. We're going to install it and we are going to configure it. Unlike Mac users, for Windows users, you actually have to download and install Git. By default, it is not available, okay? So I'm going to go to my Windows machine. I am remotely connected to the machine right behind me. That's a Windows machine. I'm on my Mac. It's easier to record and everything, so I'm remotely connected to that guy. All right, so the first thing we want to do is make sure you don't have it. So open command prompt and type git dash dash version. As always, for most programs, you do dash dash version to see if it exists. Hit enter and you get a message like this: Git is not recognized. That means Git is not installed. It's not available, okay? So open a browser. I'm going to open Chrome and I'm just going to search for download Git. Just Git. You don't have to search for Git bash. Then go to download Git, click on Windows, and just download the latest version. If you have a 32-bit, which is an older type, most new laptops have 64, go ahead and download the 32. But most of us will probably do 64-bit. That is going to download Git, okay? And when you download Git, it comes with a few things, even a UI tool like Git bash and everything. In our case, we don't really care much about that. We just want Git, okay? So that is downloading. I'm going to go to my downloads folder. Let me go to downloads and let's see it is done. So I'm going to double click it and install it. You will install just like you install any other program. Git is an application. It is a software you install on your machine. Okay, so this thing came up, read it, right? And accept. Where do you want to install? Just leave it as default. For me, I leave it as default. I used to have it, so I just uninstalled it. I'm trying to install it again. So saying, hey, this folder actually exists. So I'm just going to say override it. All right. So I'm going to leave everything as default. Let's just quickly look at it. Create additional icons on desktop. Sure. I'm just going to leave everything as is. It's not a lot of it. Okay. Open Git bash here, blah, blah. All right. Just let's leave it as default. Click on next. Click on next. Use Vim as the default editor. Now, unless you know how to use Vim, I don't recommend you do this. You can change it later on in the configs, using the config, but it looks like we do have an option to change it here. So depending on what you have, if you have VS Code, I definitely recommend you use VS Code. I did install VS Code here before, so right there, use Visual Studio Code. That is my recommendation. Okay. And if you have PyCharm, you can do PyCharm, C#, C++. No, I mean Notepad++, C++. Notepad++ is a good one. It's a very lightweight editor. But Visual Studio Code. If you don't have Visual Studio Code, just cancel this. Okay, so it would automatically detect it. Install Visual Studio Code and start installing Git again. That's really my recommendation. Okay, then this will install only for users. Go ahead, that's fine. Let Git decide. Override the default branch name for new repositories. You know what? Currently master. I'm just going to do this. So this is not going to make sense to you right now, but branches, there's a concept of branches. And back in the days, everything was called, the main branch was called master. These days, for some reason, everybody changed the procedure or the way we do work. And the main one is called main instead of master. That's why this is asking. Let's just say main is the main one. So basically, when you create a new Git repository, you will create a main branch. All right, click on next. Leave this as default because it's recommended. Most of the time, you leave it as recommended. Use bundle, open SSH, use external. You know what? Let's just leave it as is. This is for SSH. We'll talk about it. Use open SSH library. Go ahead. Go ahead. Just leave it as default. Everything as default. You most likely don't have to worry about most of these things. In fact, the last time I installed, I don't remember having to deal with all this. Enable experimental support. Don't do that. Enable experimental. Don't do that. Because for you, if something goes wrong, it's kind of hard to figure things out. Let the advanced users worry about that. Okay. So it's installing. Right now, it's just installing Git. And once Git is installed, we're going to look at the configs and we are going to configure it. The two main requirements are configuring the username and the email, okay? The name and the email. So when you go back to the cheat sheet, don't forget to use a cheat sheet. This is a Git command. It's global. It doesn't depend Mac, Linux, or Windows. Git is Git. It's platform independent. Of course, the way you install a program is different. How you use the program is exactly the same. All these commands, whether you're on a Mac or on a Windows or on Linux, they're the same. Okay, so this cheat sheet is very useful for everybody. So now these two are the main ones we really care about. This one here, right, the core editor, we already did it when we're installing it. When we're installing it, we gave us a drop down with a list of editors, and we selected Visual Studio Code. That's what this line would have done. So we probably don't have to do it. But this too, we might have to do it. So we're going to look. We're going to see. All right, this is done. It says launch Git Bash. Let me just click that just so I can show you. Git Bash is a terminal. It's like on a Windows machine, right? This is a little terminal on a Windows machine, but it's running Bash. Bash is the shell. Bash is the language. You don't really have to worry about it. It is Bash. So it gets a little bit confusing. If I do pwd, this is a file system. The slash is this way, right? That's a Unix, Linux, Mac file system. It's not a Windows file system. So things get a little confusing when you're working in here. But if you want to use Bash, you couldn't use Bash. So now you have Bash on Windows. Totally different topic. We don't need to worry about that. We just need to worry about CMD. So in CMD, since I never closed the window, it's probably going to error out again. It says Git is not recognized. So you have to close it out, okay? Remember, that's important. This has to do with the environment. When we open a terminal, that is one particular environment. And once that's open, we make changes to the environment. And this open terminal has no idea the environment has changed. So this is a common practice. If it says something is not found, you go in and install it and close the terminal or CMD. The same holds true as on a Mac terminal, but CMD or PowerShell, whatever you're using, just close it, open a new one. I'm going to come here and open command prompt again. And now I'm going to do git -- version. Now I didn't get an error. That means Git is actually available. 2.452 is available. Okay, so now let's look at the configs. So git config -- global -- list. Isn't that right? How do you see the available configuration? Git config global list. Okay. Hit enter, and that should show us our configuration. We only have just one configuration, which is the editor. Okay. That we have VS Code and we have this wait option. We need that option. I do not want to explain that because it's just going to make it complicated. So now let's add a few more configurations just to be consistent. Not just be consistent, these two are required. So I'm going to actually set this. Actually, I don't think I can copy paste from my Mac into my Windows. Let me try it because, oh, it does work actually. But on my Mac, I have to do Command C, and on my Windows, I have to do Control V, right? So let me just say admin-info, okay? Then I'm going to do git config global email. I'm going to use the same thing. Super software quality assurance is like the long name of my company at gmail.com. Super SQA, software quality assurance. All right. I might have a typo there. I didn't even double check. Let's see. Something is wrong. Oh, it's not just global email. It's user.email. So user.email. There you go. We're going to list the configurations. We got these 3 configurations. Okay. So we can add a few more if we wanted to. Again, to be consistent with what we did on the Mac, we're going to add that here. Control V. Hit enter. Let's list it out. When we list it, we see it there. Let's do one more. We're going to take this guy and we are going to paste it, hit enter. We're going to list all the configs and all our configurations are there. So Git is working. It is set up. You can actually run Git commands. If I do Git status, it's going to say, hey, this is not a Git. This is not a fatal, right? It's an error, but it's not. Git actually did run. It's saying, not a Git repository. You're not in a folder that is actually tracked by Git. We'll talk about that later. So your Git is working. You have it installed. You have it configured. Both on Mac, on Windows. Both users are ready to go. Now we can proceed.